All right, let's get started for the day, everybody. How, Petu Ashtelo, Guthrie Kapasa Machapi, Inyawos Laha Uyanke Mataha, Wana, Rochester Tuahe, El Wahi. Well, good to be with you all today. My name is Guthrie Capicella. I am from the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe over in North and South Dakota. Currently live and work in Rochester, Minnesota for Mayo Clinic. And you are here for Indigenous health topics today. Let me share my screen and we'll get going. It's good to be with you all today. All right, here we go. Okay, so we already said this part. I'm glad you're all here. So a couple of things real quick. Lelania is going to be speaking until about the top of the hour at 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, we'll start doing Q&A, and we'll also do that informal piece. So we'll be able to hop off mute, ask questions, have conversations, those kinds of things. And then until then, though, as you have questions, you can drop them in the Q&A, and we will go in chronological order as we receive them. We're starting to build our community here. We continue to grow our viewership every month, which has been fantastic. And so I think is one of the things that we can do to continue to grow our community is let's make sure we're introducing ourselves in the chat, maybe talking about who you are, where you're from, if you're tribally enrolled or from a tribe or work for a tribe, or what organization you work for. Maybe talk about your role, where you're at in the world today, those kinds of things. So introduce yourselves, get to know each other. Want to keep the momentum going and continue to grow our networks. All right. Well, I'm really excited about our guest speaker today, Lelania Walker. She is the CAC coordinator for the White Earth Tribal Child Advocacy Center. She's enrolled Muskogee Creek and descendant of White Earth and Mississippi Choctaw Nations. And her presentation is on healing generational cycles of trauma, Minnesota's first tribal child advocacy center, implementing culture in the response. So really excited to have her today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to let you take it away, Lelania. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you, Guthrie. Beautiful introduction. Way to get your language on here. My name is Lelania Walker. I'm the coordinator of the White Earth Tribal Child Advocacy Center up here in Minnesota. And I am really excited to be here and thank you for having me here, Guthrie. We'll go ahead and get started. And do you want me to share my screen or are you going to
Yep.
share?
Go ahead
Okay,
and share your
sounds
screen
good.
and your slides.
Okay. Alrighty. Sorry, guys. Let me see here.
No worries. It's December. Everything's running a little slower now. It got down to 0 degrees yesterday.
Right, yes. And I do want to see where everyone's from just so I can see um where we're working and we're interacting with youth and families. So keep sharing while I get this rolling here. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay. I'll switch over here. There we go. Well, today we'll be talking about healing generational cycles of trauma and how Minnesota's first tribally operated child advocacy center implements culture within our services. Um, being that we do serve child victims of crime, we do interact with a lot of parents who do have that portion of, this happened to me when I was a kid, and this is bringing back a lot of memories and it's triggering and sometimes they'll need that support but also sometimes they utilize that within their resilience too. This happened to me and I'm going to make sure that the system doesn't treat my child the way that I've been treated. So that's kind of that incorporation of the intergenerational healing that our center has. So a little bit more about me. I graduated from the University of Minnesota Morris, double majoring in psychology and human services with a subplan of criminal justice. I conducted a study alongside my research mentor Dr. Heather Peters, and conducted a study based on Indigenous epistemologies that measures how an individual's ethnic identity, connectedness, and Wichozani relate to Indigenous leadership values, which we will be talking about a little bit later today. I'm also a forensic interviewer at the White Earth Tribal Child Advocacy Center and have that advanced training. And I became the coordinator in February 2022. And that's when our center first opened, is in March. So we're very new, very happy to be here and very happy to be having a center within our reservation and serving our families and community. I'm also trained in the First Witness Advocacy Protocol, and I do have the 40-hour Native Focused Sexual Assault training. I just want to take a peek at the chat really quick to see where everyone else is from. So we have Spring Lake Park, we have Leech Lake, awesome, you're not too far from me, Rebecca Fine Day. We have, oh wow, Washington. We have a lot of different awesome people here, nutrition specialist, Baltimore, working at Johns Hopkins, Guardian ad litem, that's awesome. Yes, Oklahoma, Indian Country, Muskogee, that's where I'm from. Autumn Person from White Earth herself, that's amazing. And she's doing some Indian ed down in the metro area. And yes, we are childhood friends. Thank you for being here. Stephanie, wow. Tuba City, awesome. Well, I'm just really happy to be here and seeing the wide variety of people here with different fields and different roles within care and services to Native people. So let's get started here. This will go, there we go. So today we'll be talking a little bit about the CAC. I don't want to cover too much about it. I do have a little video just to have us get a little oriented to the child advocacy and the MDT approach. Then we'll go on to our historical trauma lens that we have at our center, our resilience lens, and then we will talk about different ways CAC incorporates culture, and then we will do our closing. So this should be able to play from here. Guthrie, can you hear everything okay, or no?
Yeah, I could hear that.
Okay.
Advocacy Center, or CAC, provides support to victims of child abuse. Without a CAC, an abused child may have to tell their story over and over again in settings that may be scary or where kids may think that they're in trouble. Then, families have to search around for the services their children need, all on their own. But in a CAC, a child tells their story to a trained interviewer who makes the process gentle on the child and finds the facts which are crucial to the child's case. Then, a community of professionals in medicine, law enforcement and child protective services, prosecution, victim advocacy, and other heroes work through the CAC to decide the best way to help the child. And CACs provide science-backed mental health care that heals kids from trauma and helps them reclaim their futures. This community of caring professionals rallies around the child so children have everything they need, all in one place, at the CAC. To find your local CAC or to sign up for updates, visit.
So I like that video because it's a fun little way to learn how a CAC functions. And here's another visual here. So without CACs, children kind of have to navigate the systems individually at different times, hopping from one place to one place, getting exams, getting mental health help, navigating the prosecution system. So with CACs, it's more so like a central like hub or almost a one-stop shop for when families have to deal with the criminal justice system. We all gather to them versus them having to go to everyone else, which is a beautiful approach. We have our multidisciplinary team, which consists of different, I'll actually talk about it later. I love our center and everything, so I'm just going to stay on track so we can be within the hour. So the White Earth Tribal Child Advocacy Center is the first tribally operated CAC in the state of Minnesota. There are other tribes currently developing CACs, and I know there is another tribe that's just very close, and I'm very happy for that. Definitely important to get these child advocacy centers within our reservations to create those culture-specific, community-specific centers that work for our communities and the kids. So services that we offer are advocacy, forensic interviewing, case management via MDT approach, referrals for trauma therapy, healing services, referrals for SANE-P, referrals for problematic sexual behavior therapy, legal advocacy, non-acute SANE-P exams, medical exams, and foster care physicals. And soon we will have mental health services and trauma therapy. And then we just hired a nurse who has her BSN and RN, and she'll be starting her SANE-P training. So we are able to still offer those exams because we do have a contract with the Mayo Clinic, and they are helping us guide the way with our mental health services. And they're such an amazing resource for us as we navigate our CAC development. So it's exciting. Here's our center in the woods, very away from the hustle bustle of the city. It's not connected to anything, so it's nice to kind of have that little house focus, neutral, chill, surrounded by the trees, feeling very, very natural. And here we have a patio in the back, and we have a mural, and this is one of the murals the families first see when they get here. This is our service area. So this is the White Earth Reservation here, and then here is the square where that's kind of like where it is within the state. So we serve the reservation and then 25 miles beyond or the border, and within the reservation there's 5 villages and then 5 incorporated cities. And our service area is roughly around 10,531. So within our service area, there's Monoma County, Clearwater County, and Becker County. And that consists of our MDT. So there's 4 different jurisdictions, each of these counties, and then the tribal jurisdiction with White Earth Police. So we do have an MDT that consists of CPS, law enforcement, and the prosecution from each county, and then of course tribal as well. So that's where we're able to bring all of the professionals together at our place for the families in our service area. So I'm going to talk a little bit about statistics before we get started into the cultural things. So I just want to highlight the reality of the Native American youth. And these are statistics for youth all over the country. It's not specific to Minnesota. So please note that there is Native American, Alaska Native children are 50% more likely to be victims of SA than Caucasian children. They overall just experience a greater total of ACEs when compared to Caucasian children. And then those ACEs are those higher traumatic types of ACEs, like compared to a divorce, it's more so like a lot of compound types of things there, just like with the substance abuse and separation and all of that. And then Native American adolescent suicide rates are nearly twice as high as the national average. And this trend has been like this for a long time. And it's really sad to think about our youth and how they have these feelings. And these statistics show that it's there. And that we really need to think about how we can decrease those suicide ideations. And then the Indian Country Trauma Center found that Native youth are 2.5 times more likely to experience trauma compared to their non-Native peers. So one thing that we do at the CAC is that we have that historical trauma lens within all of our interactions, service delivery, and building space. And what is historical trauma? It's understood as a collective trauma response within and across generations. So, for example, like loss of people within genocide, loss of land, loss of culture, resulting in that systematic transmission of trauma to generations that come after. And so large traumatic events that impact a specific population, so that can create historical trauma symptoms for that certain population. And when they have kids, sometimes those historical trauma symptoms, such as like depression, substance use, etc., there's a lot that are there. Those get passed down to the children, and then sometimes those can get passed down too. And one thing to note about that too is that as historical trauma can be passed down from generation to generation, you do have those cycle breakers too. Those people that can recognize those symptoms, recognize where they came from, and stop it. They can stop. You know what? I don't really want the substance use to be in my family and to pass it down to my kids or anything. So this is a little example of the different types of things that can happen and impact large populations, but this is specific to Native people because we aren't the only ones that have experienced historical trauma. If you think about the Japanese internment camps, if you think about the Holocaust, those are all things that impact certain populations. So specific to Native people and specific to the boarding school era, starting from 1776 to, sorry, I'm gonna move that. Okay, this is old, so 1776 to 2004. There is over like 250 policies in the Indian Policy Book that are specific for Native people. So those all impact us on a large level. And so there's like the Indian Civilization Fund Act, which was characterized by the assimilation and genocide of Native people. And there's the Indian Removal Act, the boarding schools first opened, the Carlisle Indian Boarding School. These are all things that can happen that impact us in some type of way. So when you think about it from 1776 to 2024, that's like 500 is almost, so start 1491. 1492 is when Columbus first got here. And that's not considered on here, which does have a lot of genocide too. So if you think about that 500 years of trauma onto our population over and over and over and over again, like it's hard for us to learn how to cope, especially when our coping skills are taken away, such as culture. So this is just another example of how different acts specific by the government can impact us, whether we know it or not. So we can be part of this green here. In 1978, the Religious Freedom Act was passed, which legalized that Native people could actually practice their culture. And so we can be part of this green here and getting more culture and healing to our communities. Here's a little example of the boarding school era and how you can see those physical identity transformations. You can see their hair is gone, the clothing changed, the jewelry is off. They're definitely, everything's changed about them. Dawes Act, for example, here's another example of an event that can impact a person or impact a population, loss of land. And of course, the boarding school reality, it's different for everyone. Some survivors have positive experiences and some don't. And some of those negative experiences can result in like disrupted attachments, broken cultural and family bonds, and adverse childhood experiences, such as the ones listed below. So when we think about historical trauma and multiple mass traumatic events and it being passed down for a really long time, sometimes there are certain repercussions for going through that. So like, for example, the federal government is a perpetrator. The religious denominations that ran the boarding schools are a perpetrator. So when you think about that, and when you think about those consequences that happened and how there was no repercussions for that violence that was enacted on us, those can send messages to people and they can send that down to their family too. So for example, devaluing their safety, devaluing personal boundaries, being accustomed to living in abusive environments. And if you could think of anything else that can be accustomed to while your abusers have been unaccountable for 500 years, some things like learned silence is there too. So here's just a little picture of the boarding schools in the country that's been found thus far with the report that Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland initiated. And this is just our area, specific to the Northwest. So you can see there's been 21 in Minnesota, 14 in North Dakota, 31 in South Dakota. And here's a little image of the reservations that are in Minnesota and then the boarding schools that are in Minnesota. So you can kind of see how they match a little bit there. So I don't mean to bring up historical trauma and talk about colonization. I hope one day that this is all common knowledge for us, but I do want to make sure that I just cover that before we proceed. And one way that you can implement your historical trauma lens within your school, within your center, within your agency, within your interactions, or even just at home, you can start asking questions and having different mindsets. So for example, when you're working with the family or when you're working with a child and they have those behaviors or those, those things where you're just like, that's awful, they're doing this. So instead of thinking like, what's wrong with you? Try to rephrase that and think about, ask the question, what has happened to you? Instead of asking what's wrong with this family, try to say what happened to this family. Instead of saying what's wrong with this community, try to rephrase that and ask what has happened to this community. So you can think about this with every person, every culture. It's not just Native people. So this is something you can take away. So before we hop into the cultural stuff, I do want to just say that although tribes have some similarities, each tribe is distinct and has their own cultural practice, language, and stories and history. And they're not the same. Everyone is different. Even when you go into a reservation, each community within the reservation can have different practices, which is beautiful. And just remember that not every Indigenous child and family will be the same. They all have their own healing journeys. And sometimes indigenous children and families might be unfamiliar with their history and culture. So that's, which is, fine, but it's just very important to make sure that we have those cultural appropriate resources regardless so that they can decide if they want that or not. So just as important as the historical trauma framework, we have the resiliency framework here. Resiliency is the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences. And this reminds us to remember that our ancestors passed down more than just trauma and pain. They passed down things such as resilience, strength, perseverance, intelligence, cultural knowledge, laughter, all kinds of things. And I like to include this photo. It's, I don't know the year on it, but I can tell it's pretty old. It's from the Gilbert Wilson collection at the Minnesota State Historical Society in St. Paul. And you can see these Native girls just laughing. You don't know, like, you can see a teepee here. You can see they're in the plains. It's just a beautiful, beautiful representation of the resilience that our people have had for the past 500 years and that we continue to have. And we'll talk about how we can foster the resilience within our Native communities. So one thing that we do at our CAC is that we actively try to revitalize our language in any way. And one of the ways is we have a lot of labels throughout our center. So we have like different colors on our wall labeled, and we have different signs in Ojibwe. So like you can see the Ninokasiwag, the Wawash Ishi, the Mukwa. Those are all different ways we incorporate that just to let families and kids know that we see you, we recognize your culture, you're welcome here, and it's perfectly okay for you to practice this here and learn this here, and also help you learn if you want to. And a couple other things, what we do here within that is that we do have a LGBTQ flag hanging up, which also sends another message that you're welcome here and your identity is welcome here in your scene. So there is a creation story mural in our hallway, and that leads to both of our forensic interview rooms and then our St. P office as well, our exam room. And we reached out to Anna Johnson from the Turtle Mountain Ojibwe Reservation, and she actually had a grant where she could paint this on our wall for free. We just paid her mileage, which was beautiful, and she was able to. She got the free reins on it, and she painted the creation story, which I think is great because I don't have time to go into the creation story, but the message behind it is that we kind of incorporated the creation story within a message to send to our families within their folders when they leave. And that is, despite the adversity, there's always room for new beginnings. Another thing that we do at our CAC is that we have different traditional medicines available, so like tobacco sage, sweetgrass, and cedar. And that's the abalone shell is there too. And then we have like the little medicine bags here that can carry it all. So when families come, we do offer them a medicine bag filled with everything. And they could take it if they'd like to. And then we also offer smudging before and after services also here. And one thing that we do is we do have a handout that goes over the teachings of each medicine. So it talks about like the origin of the medicine, the purpose, and the benefits, and how you can utilize that. So like talking about how prayer, connection to the spirit world, cleansing yourself of the negativity within yourself and your space, creating that space for your mindfulness and creating space for your healing, for yourself, for your family. So that's one way that we have that here. A lot of families already know this and they just want extra, but some of our families too, they don't know and they just want to learn, and sometimes it's their first time smudging, which is really cool. And we also have different Indigenous coloring books available for families, and we like to have the empowering books, and these, so we have some empowering sheets made by different artists across Turtle Island. And I really like this because they sent all these out during COVID so that kids can color them when they want to. And I think it's really cool that despite COVID and everything going on, they had resources for everyone for free, which was really cool. So we like to give stuff like this out too. And then we also like to include Aspen Rain's coloring book, which is a Red Lake artist, and she has a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous coloring book. And we also like to include Braiding Sweetgrass for young adults, and that kind of goes over Indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants, connectedness, and how important that connection is. And yeah, so we have different types of options for different ages and interests. Another thing that we do here is that we have a strong community, and that really strengthens us. So different White Earth programs, community councils, tribal colleges host numerous events for the public to attend, both family and youth. So like rising camps, community meals, festivals for fathers, women's night out, healing ceremonies, cultural classes. So these are all different resources for families and ways that they can connect. Another thing that we do is we have a family victim ceremony, if and we can offer that to families if they're interested. And we specifically work with our culture team to get these services available within our center in a safe space, because sometimes victims and their caregivers might be in a public ceremony and they could maybe get triggered. Maybe their offender is attending, or maybe their offenders' families are attending. So we're able to offer this within our center and have that more intimate and private space for them. And another thing that we do is that we host our White Earth, we host our CAC events. And we just hosted our first retreat this year, which was awesome. Local events that specifically connect our families and youth to culture, education, and social connections. So some of the different things that we've had is we'd have traditional lacrosse and skill building by our White Earth Home Health, which is awesome because that also is part of revitalizing. That traditional lacrosse has always been part of our culture, and it's great that they are introducing the community to that and having that be a game for youth to play if they'd like to. Plantain salve and Indigenous plant medicine making by a local community member. We also had deer harvest teachings, deer meat processing, healing bridge, sound bath and sound bath sessions, energy healing sessions by our tribal holistic healers. And I like that they made some sessions and healing spaces for families that we work with, because not only will they have the choice to choose if they want to attend that or not, but they also will be aware of that those services, and these services are free in our community. So it's also another way to help with the healing. They also do breath work. They also do Reiki. They do the sound bath, the group sound baths. They do um, bigger energy healing sessions that are like over an hour. It's awesome. We also had Fierce Aloha in the Ancestral Abundance and Generational Resilience. A cultural practitioner from Hawaii came and spoke to our families and our staff, which was great that we have such a strong support, like all over Indian country, with just offering different ways to be abundant and resilient within our culture and spaces here. We also offered a family yoga, caregiving yoga event. We had a Ojibwe yoga instructor attend, and she also incorporates Anishinaabe teachings and Eastern practice of yoga, which is really cool. I actually attended one with her, and she used the language when she ran her yoga classes, which I thought was beautiful. Um, and then we also have like some things like a class or a presentation. I have to move this around sometimes, sorry, such as the essential component connection between menstrual cycles, overall health, and spiritual well-being. And this was BSN. She is from Ecuador, and she talked about body sovereignty, and she talked about basically just the power women have and the power we have with our menstrual cycles and our moon, and just how we can take charge of our health and just be just more in tune with ourselves and our cycles, and how that impacts us as Native women, and how we can use that for just our everyday life. And it's great. Um, And then we also, I move this again, have had the National Native Trauma Center speak to our families, the healing power of cultural connectedness. And that was awesome because they talked about how empirical based healing is important, but also the cultural connectedness, which is kind of what I'll be talking about a little later too. We did have a local community member do some sewing classes, ribbon hand bag classes, bandolier bag classes. Um, and that is a bag that can be used just for every day, but also within different like cultural practices. And I was actually surprised that this was the most popular thing, because I wasn't surprised, but it was cool to see both genders sew and both genders be excited to learn and want to keep sewing. So I thought that was pretty cool. And we also had a local community member offer traditional dye teachings, utilizing different berries and bark to dye things for like quills and stuff for art. And then we also had the White Earth Tribal College Extension Program do food preservation teachings and samples, and giving out recipes, offering different types of methods of food preservation and gardening. And then we also had our White Earth Mental Health offer some relaxation techniques that were child friendly, which is really cool. So fostering resilience. So like we have that MDT. So when you think back to our prosecutors, our law enforcement, our CPS, we have that for our responding to reports and crime, but we also have our network that we created of different accessible resources to families within our community. And like I said, a lot of them are free. And we do have that strong connection between agencies with the goal of helping our community members. So those agencies that support the Healing Bridge, mental health, home health, the college, the community councils, all they all work together to best meet the needs of our community. So they'll have events in each village, they'll have events, I don't know. It's just great to see how they use their different resources to kind of get more people involved within, because you know sometimes with the reservations you can see that that was a pretty big square. We're rural. Sometimes it takes a while to drive from community to community, and sometimes transportation can be a barrier. Sometimes poverty can be a barrier. So it's great that we work together to make these different resources available to families. So when our families attend our events and they learn, not only will they have that resource there, and learn and make things, but they'll learn about those other programs so that if they want to get involved and still have sessions with them, they can. And also the social idea behind it, right? So going, meeting and talking to people who have been through the same things as you, or who have, different moms who can get through this together, supporting their kids. So we have that social connection there with our survivors, but also the social connection with the helpers in our community, and keeping that there. So we're going to talk a little bit about balance now. So I did a lot of talking, and one thing, the most important thing is just recognizing that our CAC does follow the National Children's Alliance Standards of Practice, which is mainly all evidence-based recommendations, evidence-based treatments, specific trauma treatments such as EMDR, TFCBT, PCIT, which is awesome. We love that, and they have their they have a very, very important job with our kids, getting that trauma processed and that compound trauma within them released, and learning how to cope. It's great, and we love that. But we also have the cultural aftercare and the culture-based healing services that get just the same attention as the evidence-based things that we have. And being that with Indigenous people and evidence-based treatment, sometimes there are some barriers or underrepresentation, because when you think about those evidence-based just treatments that have been made from studies and practices and different types of lab work and all of that. So if you think about it, Indigenous people more than likely weren't part of those study focuses, and we're always listed as other in a lot of things. So it's like, are these evidence-based treatments really truly specific to us and will help us? Yes, they will, but being that there's those barriers and underrepresentations, it's important to find ways to also include culture within everywhere. So thinking about connectedness, belonging, identity, pre-colonial contact, we had societies. So thinking of 1491 and prior, before that, before colonial contact, we had societies with well-defined roles and responsibilities that resulted in feelings of purpose and feelings of belonging in our communities, right? So our government looked different. The way our government was ran is different. Women did have a lot of women in different cultures had a very high role within the government. It looks different, like I said, with that diverse between each tribe. We all had our own societies and roles. So when you factor in the well-defined roles and belonging in your community and feeling that sense of purpose, it does impact you on all levels, psychologically, sociology, physical, and spiritual. And that our connection is not only with ourselves, but our connection also is to our families and our communities. And that impacts us on all of these levels, psychologically, sociological, and physical and spiritual. And when you think about all those policies within that little timeline, you think about that, and you think about how the government purposely tried to disconnect us from our well-defined roles, our identity, our connectedness within each other. It really did dilute how we see ourselves within our society. Now our roles are gone, our community is gone, our culture is gone, we're in a new place, we're in a new area, having to form a reservation, and now we have to start using these Western roles. We have to start farming, we have to start you know, just selling our crops. We have to start going to church. We have to start going to school. Everything changed. And one of the articles that I wanted to reference was the Awareness of Connectedness Scale by Mohat and his colleagues. So this is a scale that specifically measures our connectedness on the individual level, family, community, and natural environment. So they specifically created a scale that measures the interrelatedness between that as well. So they had some they had different types of approaches to it. So 2-item awareness individuals and awareness family subscales, and 4-item awareness community and awareness natural environment subscales. So they were able to kind of target all of those aspects of everything. And the study found that connectedness can be measured. So there is some validity in the scale that they created. And it corroborates with other researchers' work regarding different types of well-being, different types of recovery, sober and healthy lifestyles. So it correlates with the protective factors do create, so that culture has protective factors that create feelings such as reasons for living, communal mastery. So when you think about those suicide rates, things like that, when you, I'm assuming that if you do, have that lower awareness of connectedness and you do have those culture experiences, someone offering you a cultural resource or a cultural teaching, and you do have that knowledge in you and the interest in learning more about your culture, so that can foster reasons for living and communal mastery. So I love this study. I use this study within my study that I am publishing. We measured the awareness of connectedness within our the human subjects we did research on, and we measured how that relates to your overall health and well-being, how that relates to your identity, and how it relates to your Indigenous leadership values and where you get those teachings from. So I think this is great because this is a start of how we can measure our connectedness and we can use that and how that correlates and relates to different like health scales, health topics, and stuff like that. So our culture is not really research based. We don't really do things like this, but there are researchers out there who do things like this. So we can accumulate different studies and knowledge and theories, just building that up so that we can have different things like this in academia to contribute to what those standards, those Western standards that have been there. Another study by Snowshoe and colleagues, they found that cultural connectedness may provide a protection against communal challenges by mechanisms of coping and by strengthening universal youth protective factors such as family, community, and school. So they also reiterate how important it is to have connections to your family, community, and school. And when you think about our youth too, sometimes youth can't have those connections at home. Sometimes their moms or dads are single parents. Sometimes they work multiple jobs, or maybe they're just not present. So how can those kids create a connection, a community, if they don't have it at home? So that's how we can kind of work and get those connections and feelings of belonging from different sources, such as the school, and you work in the community. How can you do that? When you work in the school, how can you create those connections within the children you work with, but also the Native community within your school district? Joseph Gahn, he's one of my favorite researchers in academia. He's at Harvard. And he reported that one participant within his study, sorry, I'm fast forwarding. He did a study with a treatment center up in Canada with one of the First Nation reserves up there. And he was doing a study, and he gathered a lot of qualitative data from people who are in that treatment program. And one person recalled in that attending a sweat lodge is where he started his healing journey. He stated that this is where I go to practice my Native culture. It's a good feeling when you're starting to find your identity, to have that sense of belonging and to have that identity as a purpose of life. So we use a lot of those words today: purpose, belonging, identity, connectedness, and these different articles show how just important it is to get those cultural teachings to our community. Um, I'm hoping that I can talk a little bit more about my study down the road, but we did have some findings that do sit well with other findings also within academia. So I'm really excited to talk about that. But going off of just talking about connectedness and identity and purpose and healing, it's just that making sure that those cultural resources are available, or teachings or education are just always there as an option. We don't want to force it onto people, but we also don't want to not have it there and just assume that people aren't interested. So having those options there and available is good, giving our families that agency of choice, giving them a variety of options is great, because maybe just one day they might want to attend, and maybe that might elicit some feelings of belongingness and interest in culture, and just going from there. So if anything, I did a lot of talking, and I really, really shortened my thing down to try to breeze through it. If anything, I really, really want you guys to take away how culture impacts everything. So if the definition of culture is actually the configuration of shared beliefs, values, attitudes, and behaviors that are transmitted from one generation to another by members of a particular group, and symbolized by artifacts, roles, and expectations and institutions. So I want everyone to remember that we all have a culture, no matter where we are, where we're from, if we're Native, if we're white, if whatever. Because not only do we have a culture, but we have intersections of culture, like socioeconomic status. How'd your family grow up? High class, middle class, or poverty, or below the poverty line? What's your sexual identity? Are you, are you sorry, I am totally blanking. So what is your sexual identity? What is your sexual orientation? What is your ability status? So, have you been in a disabled your whole life, living in a wheelchair, or have you been able to walk around and play sports your whole life? Are you LGBTQ? Because that adds a layer of culture and reality for people. Are you transgender? Are you female? Are you? There's so many layers to our culture that go beyond just our race and religion. So being aware of all of that and how that can impact us in our realities and our worldview, and just be aware of our biases that we might have, and just be willing to learn. And just in general, if you don't know, just be respectful. Be respectful of all cultures. We all, even though we're on the res, we work with different backgrounds, different races, and we still always do, always willing to learn and just being aware of our biases and everything. So that's all I got. Miigwech, thank you for listening and taking the time to better understand Indigenous communities and families. My email's there if you guys ever have any questions. I just like to end our presentation with a picture of my family, just showing that we're still here, we're still thriving, we're still abundant. So yeah, thank you.
Lelania, that was awesome. Excuse me.
Thanks, Guthrie.
Here, hold on. I'm gonna grab your email and drop it in the chat for folks.
Okay.
We do have one question in the Q&A right now.
Okay.
I'm hoping we'll start there. Okay, so everybody, I dropped Lelania's email in there. Let's see here. With all of the amazing holistic healing methods, do you do or have looked at more plant medicine integration, both psychedelics and medical marijuana, while balancing sobriety, promotion for our communities?
Let me see. I do want to go back to that just so I can look at that.
There.
I'm sorry, I'm really bad at keeping up with the chat. Can you repeat that again, Guthrie?
There, with all of the amazing holistic healing methods, do you do or have you looked at more plant medicine integration, both psychedelics and medical marijuana, while balancing sobriety and promotion for our communities?
Okay. We have not. We have not looked at utilizing the psychedelic or medical marijuana types of holistic healing. And I don't really plan on it just because we do only work with youth. And that might be a little bit more appropriate for maybe the like adult substance abuse treatment programs and stuff like that around here.